Welcome to TechWire, a conversation about government, technology, and policy in California. My name is Christina Gagne, and today I'm joined by Shehryar Khan, who's the mobile offering leader in North America for Deloitte. Shehryar, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I understand that you were a speaker earlier today. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your session?
Yeah, so the session was really focused on talking about some of the mobile-related innovation that we're seeing in the private sector, commercial sector, and how some of that would be applicable to public sector or the government. Some of the examples that I covered were sort of this focus right now on around health and wellness. Right? So this notion of sort of having these accessories like the Nike Fuel Band or apps that encourage you to exercise more or walk more, and how those things, your sort of recipes, nutrition, how all of those things collectively can help you live a healthier and better lifestyle. Right? So I think there's lessons that could be brought away from the health and wellness space in the private sector to the public sector. Additionally, if we look at sort of shopping and retail, one of the big trends in that space is around point of sale, right? Or using your mobile device to check out. So you walk into a store, instead of standing in line and handing your credit card to somebody, the experience is much more around the point of sale, the team member basically coming to you to sort of process that transaction. I think the applicability there is around sort of self-service. So instead of going to some place and sort of charging your credit card, making a transaction, if you could do that from your mobile device, regardless of where you are, I think from a public sector standpoint, the government could collect on funds a lot sooner through this sort of more optimized sort of experience. I think the third relevant example that I talked about in my presentation was around sort of the travel or transportation experience. I think you have a lot of companies in the commercial sector that think of it in a sort of very sort of fragmented manner. They're very sort of focused on give me directions. They're very focused on find me parking at this particular location. But I think the real play there is thinking about the entire experience. Right? So if you think from a resident of the state of California and they have an event or they want to sort of engage in an entire experience, whether it's sort of finding your way to a specific location, which includes traffic, whether there's construction along the way or not, finding a nearby parking lot which has slots in it, and then being able to charge your credit card to pay for parking. Thinking of it in terms of that overall experience is one of the other things I talked about in my presentation.
Well, there's a lot of promise for the use of mobility and mobile technologies for government, but what are some of the challenges that you think government will face? I mean, many of the examples you gave were very unique to the private sector examples, and the private sector has a lot more leeway in terms of being innovative sometimes for regulatory reasons. So what are some of the challenges the government faces, and how do you think they can overcome them?
Yeah, so I think the challenge that everybody faces is the pace at which the environment is changing. Right? So I think the very definition of mobile is changing underneath us. 3 or 4 years ago, it was a smartphone. Okay, then you had the tablet. Right now, you have sort of Google Glasses coming up. Think about sort of vehicles like the Tesla being connected all the time. So the definition of what qualifies as a mobile device or mobile sort of component is changing. Right? So the challenge that everybody faces is how do you succeed in this sort of environment? Okay? And the way you succeed in this space is you sort of adopt a very agile, nimble perspective on mobile, right? So it's less about spending the next 3 years, say, building your application, and it's much more about spending the next 2 weeks, the next 4 weeks, coming up with a very specific sort of concept, and then testing it out with the residents, with users, getting their feedback, and then iterating. Okay, so this sort of agile, nimble, being able to adapt mindset is important. And then the other thing that's very important is the apps themselves, the mobile space, these sort of experience that we built out are only going to be as effective as the back-end systems that support them, right? So having a good sort of foundation in place, so having these sort of web services and integration endpoints in place, investing in those back-end systems will ensure that, whether it's your iPhone, whether it's your iPad, whether it's the next generation vehicle, or whether it's Google Glasses, all of those devices will be able to connect to your back-end system, right? So I think investing in some of those integration points and being able to extend to any digital endpoint as opposed to just the mobile endpoint is something that a lot of organizations face, and that is what I would describe as the primary challenge.
So what's next on the horizon? Like looking 5-10 years from now, what is mobility going to look like?
Yeah, so great segue. There's three key trends that we see as we look to the future. I think you have new and unique interaction models that are going to be born. So 2008, it was all about touch. Then you had voice, right? So Siri being able to talk to your mobile device. If you look at Google Glasses, you've got this sort of vision-based experience. The Microsoft Kinect is much more of a gesture-based experience. So I think looking out over the horizon, we'll see new and different, unique interaction models that'll pop up. So that's one trend. The other trend is when I talk about the definition of mobile, every device is going to be a connected device before too long. And we have good examples of that out there today. The Nest thermostat, the Fitbit, the Nike Fuel Band. But when you think about sort of this environment where everything is a connected device, all of a sudden those devices are a lot smarter than they used to be, right? A refrigerator knowing what's in your fridge and then showing you recipes that correspond to what's in your refrigerator, right? So that's another sort of trend we're seeing. And the third trend is really around context, right? So today you have sort of the better mobile apps are very good at sort of knowing who you are, where you are, and what time it is, right? And sort of what you're doing. And they can give you this sort of very tuned sort of experience around it. But now if you flip that around where everything is a connected device, I can see a potential scenario where you walk into a room and the room changes based on context, right? So it knows who you are, what you're doing. And the very sort of the environment is going to morph based on that information. So those are the three main trends. New interaction models, connected devices, device ubiquity, and finally context.
Well, Shehryar, thank you for sharing your expertise with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you to our audience for joining us once again in a conversation about technology, policy, and government in California.